Alright team, so we're back, of course, to talk about some Final Fantasy VII Remake, and we're back with another discussion video. This time we're talking about what, at least as of right now, as of making this video, what I want most from Remake Part 2, and I guess technically with the topic of this video, the Remake Project as a whole. Now, we've definitely had similar discussions before in the past, like, for example, did a video over a year ago about some changes I'd like to see with Part 2, so stuff I'd like them to alter from Part 1 going into Part 2. But I don't know if we've done a video exactly like this or not, or discussion like this. But the most common thing that I see talked about usually when it comes to Part 2 is them opening up the game more. Some level of exploration. Now, to what degree people want the game to open up, that kind of varies. People just want to be able to enjoy the world, soak in the environments and stuff like that, and just have more to do in the world in general. Now, to a certain degree, I think it's kind of a given that Part 2 is going to be bigger, both in general, but also in scope. And the fact that we came from Midgar. Midgar is a city that's, we're kind of locked into the city, so to speak, and we're only going to a certain amount of sectors and things like that throughout the story. So that's why there wasn't this level of exploration where you could go to every single sector and all that shit. Would we have liked that? Absolutely. And while I, of course, agree with that, for the most part, there's nothing wrong with a linear game. Games that make you play the story where you can't just kind of get distracted. Because if you're on the hunt for, say we're chasing Sephiroth at a certain point, if you could stop what you're doing, turn around, walk the other direction, and spend hours and hours and hours doing a bunch of side content, they kind of throw off the pacing of the story, right? So there's something to be said whenever they make you play the story. So I'm not totally against a linear game. But I do expect Part 2 to be just bigger in general just because of what we're doing. We're going to be traveling the world hunting down Sephiroth, so they kind of have to have bigger zones and things to explore. Anyways, that's not the point of today's video, though I do love discussing that topic. So today's video kind of stems from me watching Max's videos where he talks about Remake, which I thought I had seen. I feel like I should have watched all of Max's videos in regards to Remake. He's one of my favorite minds when it comes to the game. I love his interpretations and stuff and his reactions and stuff. Now, what we're talking about today doesn't actually derive directly from anything that he said. He was just talking about, I believe maybe his discussion about the ending of Remake Part 1, base game Remake. And just something he said just kind of triggered something in my mind where, I think what I want most from Remake Part 2, and again, I suppose probably the Remake Project as a whole because of what happens at the end of Part 1, is for them to actually capitalize on the fact that we defeated Fate and Destiny. Because they make such a big deal about it, right? The Whisperers are keeping us in line all throughout the game, forcing us to fall in line with the events that happened in the original Final Fantasy VII, but of course at the end of Remake Part 1, we defeat them. We destroy them, get rid of them, they're no longer there, so that if we want to deviate from the path, we can. And what I'm hoping they do going forward is taking advantage of that. At a certain point in my life, I was an original game purist. I didn't want them to change anything, dude. Before we even really started getting info for the game, I really thought it was just going to be FF7 Remake. We're just going to get a modernized version of the original Final Fantasy VII with no changes at all. And then once we started getting information on that, I was against it. I was against it not being a turn-based game initially back in the day. But as we spend almost 2 years now with this game, dude, I've grown to love it so much. Now, I've always loved the game since release, but I've just got more attached to it the more I've talked about it, the more I've discussed theories and things like that, the more I've anticipated and looked forward to the next game. Sort of to the point that I want the game to almost be a lot different. Now, I know we're going to go down a lot of the same path. I don't know to what ratio, 50-50, old stuff, new stuff, 60-40, I don't know, maybe 90-10. It might be a lot of the same shit we did in the original FF7, which is also fine, but I hope that they take advantage of the fact that there's no longer this thing looming over our group. Destiny, Fate, whatever, making us do what they want us to do. We can do anything we want. And now, how they're going to take advantage of that, I don't know. Now, we're going to get into a bit of spoiler territory when it comes to the original Final Fantasy VII, so there's your spoiler warning. I don't usually do these. I usually don't give a shit, but here we are. I'm giving you one now. Is the change going to be something along the lines of Aerith living, something we talked about a lot? Is it that Zack is alive, or Zack's in an alternate timeline, whatever they're doing there? Is the change going to be, as we talked about previously a month ago, does Cloud have to die to fully defeat Sephiroth because Sephiroth's always attached to Cloud? Is the change going to be us fully defeating Sephiroth finally, or maybe eradicating Jenova from the planet? I don't know. That's really up to the god that is Nojima to come up with. I don't know what they're going to do with the story. And as I said with that previous video, if we get to the end of the remake story, and the dynamic is still the same, right? The same party members are alive, the same party members are dead, Sephiroth's still out there somewhere, Jenova's still out there somewhere. The journey might have been great to get to the end of the remake project, but at the end of the day, it's still just the same as it always was. And I personally want a conclusion to the Final Fantasy VII story, if that makes any sense. They can always do branch-off games. Games that take place in the past, that we follow a certain character or brand new characters, whatever the case. That can always be done. But the fact that they're, all this time later making a fifth installment to the compilation that is in some ways a sequel to the games before it, I feel like we need an end. There needs to be an end game here, an end goal. And when you give us this huge revelation at the end of the game that we're defeating the physical embodiment of Destiny and Fate, and we're no longer locked into the original Final Fantasy VII, I just feel like there needs to be some sort of major payoff from that. Now, I don't know what that is. I don't know what the twists and turns are. I don't know character deaths, characters not dying, what they're going to do there. I just hope that it's something that we aren't expecting, because we've talked about this game to motherfucking death at this point, my dudes. We've theorized and theorized about it. And I would love to step into the next game and us be completely wrong with everything that we thought that this game was. As I've been saying for the last couple of years now on the channel, I would have been fine if Remake was just them literally remaking the original Final Fantasy VII, but one of my favorite aspects about Remake is the brand new shit. But let's be completely honest here. With the first game, they played it kind of safe, because almost nobody that we know dies, right? Jesse is possibly alive. Biggs is definitely alive. We didn't see Wedge die on camera, on screen, so more than likely he's alive. It seems like they brought Zack back to life. Like, there's almost no danger or threats in this world, and at a certain point, they gotta buckle down and take the story serious, if that makes any sense. Like, I'm not saying that they're not, but like, there needs to be consequences in this world, and I'm not just vying for character deaths, and that's the twist and turns that I want. But to be perfectly fair, characters surviving is a culmination of us defeating fate. So we're already seeing them kind of lay the groundwork for some big changes. But like, what does it mean going forward? Are Jesse, Biggs, and Wedge going to be a part of the remake story going forward? How are they even going to be a part of it if they're back in Midgar and we're traveling the planet? And maybe the point of Remake Part 1 is the juxtaposition of future events, because the ending of Remake is very, very positive, right? We defeat the Whisperers, and a lot of happy scenes are played at the end. But there's got to be negative consequences of that, and I hope that's what we get going forward. Like, I want a really serious, good, dark story. With, of course, some fun Final Fantasy VII stuff along the way. I'm not saying I just want a bleak, oppressive, depressing story the whole time. Though I am a fan of that shit too, but that's not the direction I want them to take, Remake. I don't want to be sad the whole time, just at certain points, but of course, my dudes, that's going to be pretty much the video pass off to you guys. So as of right now, we know that we're getting something for Part 2 sometime this year, hopefully. They want to talk about it. So now that we're kind of on the eve, so to speak, of news and information for the game, when it comes to Part 2, what are you most looking forward to as of right now? Just one thing. Other my dudes, that's going to be the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, give a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, guys. Arnie wants to today more Final Fantasy VII Remake content. Turn on all notifications. Follow me on Twitter, @davidYT. I'm a Discord. Links are in the description. In the outro. Later, guys.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Logain, or leave it like Cobain.